So my kids do this little game that they climb on the highest thing they can possibly climb on, and then out of nowhere just yell, "Dad!" Which of course means, "Dad, I'm leaping through the air, and if you don't catch me, I'm going to break my head open." Now, fortunately, I catch them because really I'm a ninja trapped in this body, and at any given moment, they can be leaping through the air. I can catch them head first. I'm like, "You cannot do that," and they trust Dad. They over the years, for whatever, they trust me to catch them. They have faith that I'll catch them. And, I've been kind of thinking about a lot lately and writing about and talking about, like, trusting in God. And it's so easy intellectually. It's so easy to, like, yes, everything in Scripture clearly tells me I can trust God. Everything in my experience has told me I can trust God. It's just when it comes to the actual moment, kind of in the future, where I actually have to trust God, I many times kind of look out into that void and say, I don't know what I'm actually supposed to do here. I don't know what trust actually looks like many times. I can say to myself, I don't feel like I'm really trusting God right now. I know I want to trust God. What should that look like in my life? If I continue on with this illustration, my kids I can't bring them to I can't bring them to the Grand Canyon or anything right now. I think they would leap off and yell, "Dad, catch!" But even with something so much smaller than that, I'm just trying to say, I think I would come to the edge knowing that I need God to catch me here. I got nothing I can do here. I need God to catch me. I would want to see, hey, God, can you catch someone that looks very similar to me first so I can know that you can do it? Okay, and then probably I'm like, okay, yeah, I see you there. Hold on, can I reach a foot there? I think I'd probably hang onto the edge as far as I could go, see if I could feel him. I'm sure, knowing myself, I'm going to be like, well, I think the first thing I should do is build a bridge. Because if I'm capable of building, I built a house. I could build a bridge, all right? And so I start building a bridge. Well, let me see how far I can get it. I'll build the bridge as far as I can. Let's see if I can reach God in that way. And I'm sure he wants me to do everything I'm capable of doing first. So let me build this. And of course, as I'm building this bridge, I realized that yes, I built a house, but it was only because someone was telling me nail that into that. Okay, I can do that. Even when the time came, if I had to step on my own bridge, I think I'd be terrified to step on I'm not always weird about heights. I had to go up on my roof the other day, and I got weirdly scared. It's the ladder I was using was not quite tall enough, so it was just barely over the edge of the roof, and I was terrified. I was I'm only gonna fall 9 feet, but it was still really scary. If I had to walk across my own bridge I built, I'd be terrified. I'd be worried the whole time. And, I think at the end, if I kind of just picture that there's this time and that the wall is getting closer and I'm going to run out of time, I'm going to fall off the cliff eventually. And when I finally do fall, that moment comes that there's no more room for me to stand and I fall over the edge of the cliff. I'm going to be screaming and crying for help and whimpering. And God will catch me, as he always has before. Now that just sounds totally different than, "Dad, catch me!" How they do it so simply. They do it so effortlessly, and I'm making it this big, huge deal in my life to actually trust God. Trust is hard. Trust is hard. And what I want to look at, and hopefully, I don't know if I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get as close as I can to what trusting in God actually looks like in your life. When you say, yes, I trust God, what should your life appear like? What do you live like when you really trust God? And I have a story. It's going to be the story of Esther that we're going to be looking at. And we're not looking at the story of Esther because, look, here are people who actually trust in God. Because I actually don't think that's true. I don't see anybody in the whole story of Esther that I would really identify as godly. All right, and I know I'm what? Esther's very godly. She's one of 2 women mentioned in the Bible. She's godly. And I'm I don't know. how godly she is. There's not a lot screaming out to me that she's super godly. So I'm not using them as examples of this is what trusting in God looks like. I don't think it is. What we're going to do is we look through the story of Esther, we're going to see a story about God and why he can be trusted. Now, when we come into this story of Esther, we're basically kind of backing up what we've kind of discussed over the last several weeks, that the Israelites, through their disobedience, were finally, deservedly punished by God and sent into exile. All right, and so then we get the stories of like Daniel. All right, that's when they're living in exile in Babylon. And in the very end of Daniel, where you get Daniel in the lion's den, the Persians had come in and defeated the Babylonians. So now they're no longer in the Babylonian Empire, they're now in the Persian Empire. All right, and so it's under this that they're going to finish out their last few years. There's a 70 years that they're going to be in captivity. And at the end of that 70 years, as Pastor Al went over with last week, I assume, I wasn't here, that he talked about that now there's a return to the land. All right, they are post the exile now. All right, they are allowed to return back home just as all the prophets had prophesied. All right, and so now all the Jews get to return back to Jerusalem and start building a life for themselves, and they start, building this wall. All right, and there's still one issue is where we get into the story of Esther. And it's hard to put a time, place. It definitely seems to be after Ezra and Nehemiah. All right, but we get this little snippet, this little story, this kind of out-of-place story that doesn't fit in anywhere, because the Jewish people here are the people who didn't return back to the land. They were allowed to return to Jerusalem, and this is a story about the Jews who didn't go. They stayed in the Persian Empire. All right, and they seem to be somewhere near Persia. They stayed in Persia. All right, and they didn't return back. Now, I think there's lots of reasons why they didn't go back. I think some had really high up positions of authority. We see in Daniel and his, and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the like were kind of of the 27 provinces that were in the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, they were over them. So there were multiple Jewish people that had really high positions of authority. And I think some of them, when it came time to go back, were like, well, do I want to be a governor or do I want to lay brick all day? And I think a lot chose to stay in the governor's mansion. I think a lot chose to stay. I think there were some that had businesses that they had built up, all right, and they had employees, and they had a life, and they had a family. I think some of them maybe had family that weren't Jewish, and so they're like, it doesn't make sense for me to go back. I'm going to stay. I wouldn't look at every reason why. I think there's probably some reasons why some of these people stayed they were no longer following Jehovah. They were no longer following after God. They were kind of only nominally Jewish, Israelite. They weren't really following the religion anymore. I think that's some, not all. I think some were still faithful and they didn't hear any direct command from God, thou shalt return. But there's no doubt about it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They cannot be obedient to the law and stay where they're at. All right, they would need to go back and help build the temple so they can start the sacrifices again. They would need to go back to Jerusalem multiple times per year for the different festivals that were going on. So there's no doubt about it. There is some reason to indicate that the people that stayed in Persia did not have the greatest of motives for staying. Now, when we talk about the narrative in Scripture, kind of one of our big, broad statements that we can always say about the Bible when we talk about interpreting the Bible. When we're dealing with a narrative, a story in the Bible, the main character is always the same. And the main character in the book of Esther is God. God is always the main character. So God is the main character of the story of Esther. Here's the interesting part. God's name is never mentioned. God isn't mentioned, the Lord, Creator, the Almighty, nothing. Not his personal name, not a generic name. God is never referred to. prayer is never referred to. The one instance that we see the mention of fasting, Esther says, fast for me. She doesn't even really bring up God in that moment. We don't see anybody praying. We don't see anybody following God in any way. He is not even alluded to. It's not even, you don't even get a capital H-I-M. You get nothing. In the whole story, how can God be the main character in a story in which he's never mentioned? He's never mentioned. How can he be the main story? Because that's how powerful God is. That even when the characters in the story, even when people aren't recognizing God, God is still in control. Even when people don't see God, God is still in control. Even when the people don't hear God, God is still in control. All right? And so we actually kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into kind of our life. Like, I think sometimes we look at it and say, like, man, it'd be so much easier if we, the stories of like Moses and Jesus where like God tells the people what to do and they either obey or disobey. That's a lot simpler. All right? And now here we get a story in which God does not do anything amazing in the sky. There's no miracles. There's, no voice from God talking to some prophet that brings it to the people. He's totally silent throughout the story and totally in control. So how do I know? How can I presume so much that God is in control and God is working even if he isn't mentioned? Well, I see 5 events in the life of Esther. 5 things that happen that to me scream that is a little bit too much to be coincidence, especially if you have to say, well, this was coincidence and then this was coincidence and it was coincidence and this happened and coincidence. It's too complicated to be coincidence. You see God's hand moving. You see God controlling the situation without the people even realizing it. So I have the 5 things I think reveal that God is in control in the story of Esther. And the first is right in the very beginning. So King Ahasuerus, also known as King Xerxes, if you saw the movie 300. So King Xerxes is the king over all of Persia at this time. And he calls his wife, and probably had many wives, but he called one of his favorites, Queen Vashti. And he is drunk out of his mind with all the other little royal officials, and they're drunk out of their mind. And they call Queen Vashti to come and present herself before them. We can speculate. We don't know. Maybe there was more there than just come and stand so we can look at you. I think maybe there was inappropriateness that Queen Vashti just put her foot down and said, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. Now, this is so foreign. Now, today, we can kind of see, like, good for her. But when we look back then, we can see like this is really out of the ordinary. All right, for them, for a king like this over this kind of empire to call on one of his wives to come and do something, this was not up for debate. This is not an area where you could question. It was plain and simple in the Persian Empire. You obey the king. And if you disobey the king, you have a little line of here. You can either be killed on the spot or you can be banished. Those are your options. And Queen Vashti, living in the lap of luxury, when she is told to come before the king, refuses. And so the next chapter, he's looking for a new queen. All right, she's sent away, banished, killed. What are the other things? I think maybe they told the people like, oh no, Queen Vashti just went away to a farm, a really nice farm. And it was lots of pastures. She loves it. She's happy. She's running around in the pastures. I think maybe that's what they told people. All right, but Queen Vashti's gone. All right, I see God moving right here from the very get-go. Queen Vashti does not fulfill the plan that God wants to fulfill. He needs a young Jewish woman in the palace, and he's going to maneuver and move, and now Queen Vashti's out of nowhere, disobeys the king, and is kicked out of the kingdom, and now the king is doing an American Idol-style search for the next queen of Persia. All right, and as they start going and looking around, he finds, what they basically did, they had this, they gathered all these young women together, and they basically went through like a year of princess training. All right, that's a thing apparently. All right, and you go to this training, and they basically like fed you well and put makeup on you, and just like they re-taught you everything so that you could then be presented before the king. And everyone found Esther. Everyone that met Esther just knew this is the girl. She found favor in everybody's sight. She had lost her parents and was being raised by her uncle Mordecai. And Mordecai is the one, when he hears about the Persian princess idol, suggests, here, you need to go and go and do this. You're beautiful. Everyone knows this. So let's go and let's start making some college money here. All right. And so she goes, and she is the chosen one. She is chosen to be the new queen of the Persian Empire. All right. And it's during this time that Mordecai, hanging closer to the palace, kind of keeping an eye on his little niece there that he loves, overhears a plot. I can see it. He's like behind the gates, and there's two of the top officials in Ahasuerus's empire are plotting against, and they're planning on killing the king of Persia. And Mordecai hears this, and he's like, man, I don't want the king. My niece is about to be picked as queen. All right. So he runs and tells someone that is able to then bring the news to King Xerxes that there is a plot to kill you, that these two men high up in your cabinet are planning on assassinating you. All right. And I missed my little cue. Assassinate. Are planning on assassinating you. All right. And they start investigating it, and as rumors prove true, and these two men are executed. And King Xerxes puts in there, he says, please write in the chronicles of the kings of Persia that Mordecai had saved the king and that he deserves many blessings in my kingdom. And so the little royal scribe takes it out and writes it in pen. Mordecai saves the king, many blessings. Excellent. Excellent. How was Mordecai in the right place at the right time to hear the right plot to kill the king? That they were able to prove to be true. I believe God had orchestrated so that Mordecai would be in the exact moment around the exact people. We're going to see later on in the story what a major plot point that really is. That is the hinge on which the rest of the story folds on. And it's such an accidental meeting that I see God's hand in making sure Mordecai hears the plot to kill the king. Well, because of this turnover in the cabinet, there are some new positions open, and Xerxes doesn't trust anyone. He is going to announce a new kind of viceroy over all the kingdom. The one that, the king doesn't want to really handle the day-to-day. He likes, wearing his, awesome outfits and, playing, the games and all the things. So he had someone that actually runs the kingdom, and he chooses this man named Haman. All right, and Haman decides to hold a big, giant parade for himself. And as he's going through the streets of Persia, and when you pass by, he wants everyone to bow down and worship him as this new viceroy over all of Persia. And as he starts riding through the city, everyone goes and bows down, except right at the gates of the palace. There's Mordecai, arms folded, staring at Haman as he goes into the city. And they make that eye contact, this little moment, they're eye contacting them. All right, and Mordecai's just standing there, not bowing down like everyone else. So Haman immediately sends one of the officials, go bring Mordecai. You ask him, why did he not bow down? I deserve worship. And as they go to Mordecai, Mordecai tells him, he says, listen, no, I am a Jew. I am a Jew. And none of the Jewish people, anybody that is truly following, all right, any Jewish person would not bow down to the king. Even in this moment, he doesn't say it's because of God. He doesn't say it's because I want to honor the scriptures or the covenant. He simply just says, because I'm a Jew, I cannot bow down. All right, and the other Jews didn't bow down as well throughout the kingdom. He just didn't get to see them because there weren't very many Jews living right there near the palace in Persia. But Mordecai stood out among the rest. And so Haman gets enraged. All right, and this is, again, I just see God's provision. The only reason that Mordecai is able to be where he is because his niece is the queen of where she is. All right, and he is in the moment where Haman could make this eye contact with him, that he gets enraged. I think normal people wouldn't care. He is enraged, and not only, all right, does he want to kill Mordecai, he views that as too simple. He had the right, as king, Haman had enough power to say, I want to kill that guy Mordecai. He had no idea that he was related to the queen. No idea whatsoever. No one knew. All right? So he says, I could kill that guy, but he doesn't want to do that. All right? His heart gets so hardened that he does not just want to kill Mordecai. He says, what I want to do is I want to kill all of his people. I want to kill all the Jews, every one of them. And I want him to see the blood in the streets. All right, so this is the evil that is coming. I see what God is doing here. I think any normal person would just be like, off with his head. But God, orchestrating what he is orchestrating, hardens the heart here of Haman in a way that he goes to the extreme. I see God do the same thing in Pharaoh's life. I feel like Pharaoh could have come up with some kind of little compromise with the Israelites, but he wasn't going to compromise in any way. In fact, every time Moses would go before Pharaoh, Pharaoh starts doubling the workload and, cutting the food rations. All right, he hardens his heart because God's like, I don't want a compromise here. I want you to let my people go. I don't want you to compromise them and put them in less slavery. All right? I want them free. And God orchestrated what he wanted to orchestrate. Here in this situation, he wasn't like, I want less of my people killed. He says, I want no one killed. All right? And therefore, he hardens Haman's heart here. So once this edict comes down, so Haman writes this big thing, goes to the king, and king signs it with his, big signature, Xerxes. All right? And as he signs this letter basically saying on the 13th day of Adar, which is the last month of the year. So the 13th day of Adar, all the Jews are to be killed throughout the kingdom. He convinces, the king of this by saying there is a group of people who have their own religion and their own beliefs, and they're against you, O God King. All right, and so, that sounds terrible. He says, we should wipe these people out. I agree. I'll write it all up. You just sign your name. And so this is all sent throughout the kingdom. Again, travel back then, it's not easy to just tweet that out. It takes weeks to spread this as big as the Persian Empire was. The Persian Empire spread from India all the way down to Ethiopia, all right, as far as kind of like, Turkey and lower Greece area. All right, this is a huge kingdom. So they wanted, this is just going to be a bloody day. On the 13th day of Adar, all the Jews, hundreds of thousands would have been killed that day. All right, and so they had to spread. He wanted it all coordinated all at the same time. And so they send his officials out to go. Well, Mordecai, of course, hears of this massacre that's going to occur and calls on his beloved niece, Esther. And he says, Esther, all right, you need to do something. You need to go and talk to the king. All right, and at first, she refuses, saying like, I don't know if you've noticed, my wardrobe has seriously upgraded here. No, she doesn't actually say that. She says like, I'm living in the palace. All right, what is this to me? Her first statement is, what is this to me? All right, she's saying like, how does this bother me? And then she does not agree. This is why I don't view Esther as godly as other people do. But I think she's very ingenious, all right, after this point. But her first reaction is, no, I'm not doing this. It's not till Mordecai threatens that it will be revealed that you are a Jew. Do you really think that you are going to escape when all other Jews are killed? All right, and it's in that moment that she begins to say, what could I do? And Mordecai says, you were appointed here for a moment such as this. All right, he sees the kind of handwriting, like so much has been orchestrated for her to be in the right position at the right time. He says, you need to go and beg before the king to save your people. Esther realizes this does not work. This is not going to happen. If you go, as much as when the king summons you, you better show up. And she knew the rules. When she's been king for a little while now, all right? Been queen for a little while now. When the king called her, she arrived. All right? But on the flip side, you are not allowed to go in the king's presence without being summoned. So she says, if I walk up to him without being summoned, I could be killed. All right? And Mordecai basically just leaves it to her of, well, you better figure it out. And there's no doubt she comes up with an incredibly wise, incredibly discerning, incredibly cunning plan. So what she ultimately decides to do, all right, is that she is going to ask for the king for a favor, but not the first moment he asks. So she starts hanging just outside of his inner chambers, just kind of walking back and forth. Here is the moment in which we need God to intervene again. She cannot walk right up to him and disturb his little afternoon tea or him playing Xbox or whatever he's doing at the time. All right? She cannot disturb him. So she continues to walk back and forth, and she needs the king to not only see her, but see her and want her in her presence, in his presence. And so he sees her, and he goes and extends his golden scepter. And him extending his golden scepter is this welcoming, come before my presence. We needed God to intervene here in that moment. And so Esther comes before the king, all right, and pleases him, whatever she ends up doing there, that he listens to her. But in the end, she says, listen, I love you, Esther. You are the most beautiful in the kingdom. Whatever you want, I will give you. And she says, I do want something, but I don't want to ask it yet. What I'd like to do is hold an incredible feast for you and your viceroy Haman. That's what I'd like. I want to cook the best dinner you've ever had. Are you ready for the best dinner you've ever had? I can't say no to the best dinner I've ever had. He says, okay, tomorrow night, I'd like to hold this dinner for you and Haman, no one else. All right, and so he agrees. He says, okay. All right, and so now the plan is in motion now. But we need one more intervention from God. Something that Esther herself could not do and had no capability of doing. As Haman gets this invitation, he gains in his boldness. All right, he sees all that his plan is about to take place here. All right, a few days away. They're in the 22nd, 23rd of the 11th month. So we're about 20 days away from this huge massacre. And he gets tired of seeing Mordecai every single day as he walks into the palace. And as he walks in to get his invitation to his dinner tomorrow night, there is Mordecai again. And when he goes home, his wife and other friends say, stop wasting time, kill him now. And so he says, yes, no, I'm doing it. I'm going to kill him now. I'm tired of seeing him. He says, go and build a 50-foot gallows to hang Mordecai in. I can do whatever I want. I'm being invited to a private dinner with the king. All right, I can do whatever. So he built this 50-foot gallows to make sure everyone could see the hanging of Mordecai. All right, and so this is where we see God intervene for the fifth time. As the king of Persia lays down in his probably giant heart-shaped bed, that's what I picture. All right, as he's laying down, he can't go to sleep. He gets little people coming in playing their little harps and their little minstrel, their little ukulele. I don't know what they played back then. All right, they start playing music, and he can't fall asleep. And so he does the thing that helps him fall asleep the most. He says, please bring in my scribe and have him start reading the book of the Chronicles of the king of Persia. That puts me to sleep every time. So he calls in the scribe, and the scribe begins in the beginning. In the beginning, Xerxes became king. That's a good one. He read all his battles, and all of a sudden he gets to the passage on the night in which Xerxes couldn't sleep. This is an unusual situation. He can't sleep. And as they begin reading the book of the Chronicles of the king of Persia, they get to the passage that reads, and Mordecai foiled the plot of the killing of the king. Many blessings upon him. And King Xerxes sits up in his bed. He says, did we honor him in any way? I totally forgot about this Mordecai guy. What did we do for him? What blessings did we bestow on someone that honors the king in such a way? And the scribe is like, "Whoa, king, I don't think we did anything. I think we accidentally let that one slip by." And he says, "We did nothing for this guy? Nothing." And he says, "Who is here?" This is earlier in the morning. "Who is here in my kingdom? Who here right now can I go and speak to?" And they go, the scribe goes and gets Haman, who's in the palace, and brings Haman to the chamber of King Xerxes. And King Xerxes asks Haman, "What do you think you should do for someone that truly honors the king, that truly it should be distinguished in the kingdom? Any ideas, Haman?" And Haman, full of pride, he's like, "Ferrari would be the first thing, I would say. Gold rings, a place of honor, welcomed to eat at your table at every meal." This is good. Scribe, write this down. All right, it says, yes, a robe and a title. Anything else? I'll get back to you. Okay, this is wonderful. And Haman walks out of this dorm room. He's like, "Who honors the king more than I do? I just got to give my wish list." He goes home and runs and tells his wife, like, "I'm going to be honored even more." And so when he runs out of the room, he tells the scribe, "Go get Mordecai. Ferrari, rings, robes, titles, let's give it all to Mordecai." Great idea. Hey, tell Haman, great ideas. Haman, great ideas. Thanks, king. So the next day, of course, having dinner at the table anytime I eat. So now it's Queen Esther's incredible meal that she prepares. There is King Xerxes. There's Haman. And now the guest of honor, Mordecai. It's staring right there across the table, I picture it, from Haman. As they eat like he eats every food, just staring at him the whole time. Never taking his eye contact off of him. Finally, at the end of the meal, who knows what you cooked, but I want to eat it. Because the king says, "That was incredible. Esther, whatever you want, you can have anything. I'll give you up to half my kingdom. What do you want, Esther?" And finally, she's willing to answer, "King, this is what I want. I want the punishment of the one who has plotted against me and my people to have me killed." What? Dun, dun, dun. He's like, "Who is trying to kill you?" He says, "There is a man in this kingdom who has tried to kill all of the Jews. I am one of them." And she reveals herself to be one of the Jews. He knows what he signed. Haman is, of course, in shock. He points out, "Mordecai is my uncle. I am a Jew. Haman is the one who has put out this edict to have me and Mordecai and all my other Jewish brothers and sisters killed throughout your kingdom. My favor to ask is that he be punished." And if the king asks, like, "What can we do?" And he says, "Well, Haman, just build a 50-foot gallows." Perfect! Hang him on the gallows. And Haman gets hung on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. They have to quickly, immediately send out my riders. We're 20 days away. They got to get, if you're there in Iran, horseback to India takes a while. All right? And they have to send word all throughout the kingdom that we are not going to be killing everyone on the 13th day of Adar. So the 13th day of Adar arrives. And again, this is not the story of, look at what it means to trust in God. I said, no, the people here in the story, I'm not viewing the people as the one who trusts God. Because on the 13th day of Adar, what the Jewish people did throughout the kingdom is they ended up killing all those who were oppressing them. And 100,000 were killed in the kingdom that day for people that were going to try to kill the Jews anyway, is how I hope to view that. But it's a big turn. So now on the 14th day is then became the festival of Purim. All right, and that's still celebrated today. All right, it's usually right around Thanksgiving time. All right, and it's an exchanging of gifts and a listing of what you're thankful for. All right, you basically have to, people that you're thankful for, and what they were doing in the early days is they would thank Esther and Mordecai for their service. Even the Iranian Jewish people today, which there are not very many present day, but for years, until very recently, where it became almost impossible to live there, there was a large Jewish contingent that lived in Iran. They lived up in the mountains. There is, even to this day, there is a grave site of, historically, they say it's where it is, of the grave site of Esther and Mordecai. And they would go and bring thanks and bring flowers to that grave site. All the way up into the late 1800s, before many of the Jews were chased out. All right, when I look at this story, and I begin to say, how can I begin to apply this to my life? Again, I'm still dealing with the same, frustration of I don't see the example of the people here as being one to exemplify. I don't see the example of, look, here are people who trust in God. All right, what I see is a God who is revealing himself to be trustworthy. And as I think about this sentence, all right, I think about, what does it mean to trust God in blank? What does it mean to trust God in my relationships? What does it mean to trust God at my job? What does it mean to trust God with someone who mistreats me? What does it mean to trust God with my money? What does it mean to trust God in crisis? What does it mean to trust God when I feel hopeless? What does it mean to trust God when I have a big decision to make? What does it mean to trust God in blank? And whatever that first thing to come to your mind, what does it mean to trust God? I think of one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible. It's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, but I'm going to read verse 7 as well. Proverbs 3, 5 to 7 says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. Now, when you break that down, when you kind of unpack it, when it says trust in the Lord, the Hebrew word for trust is this picture of a servant lying flat on his face. A servant before his master laying flat on his face, totally defensive position. Nothing that he can do, defenseless position, a totally defenseless position. Nothing he can do to bring arms against the master. He is totally laying before him and saying, I trust you. Whatever you have me do, I'm going to do, because if I refuse, I'm dead. If I try to attack you, I'm dead. I trust you. It's a helplessness. It's a submission. Now, when it says to lean not on your own understanding, to lean is exactly what it sounds like. It's, when you lean against someone else, it's holding you up. It's not a leaning in the way, I might lean on this piano here, and obviously I'm not leaning on it with all my weight, all right? To like rest on something is not what it's saying. It's to lean in a way that if you were to pull this out from under me, I'm going to fall. I'm putting my weight on it. And he's saying, don't put your weight on yourself. That makes sense, all right? Because if you're going to try to say like, yeah, I'm going to lean against myself, you can't lean against yourself, all right? You cannot say, I'm just going to sit down and use my own leg muscles. This is very comfortable. You cannot lean against yourself. So he's telling you, you can't do it physically. Physically speaking, you can't lean against yourself. Don't try to lean against yourself spiritually. Don't try to lean against yourself emotionally. Don't try to lean against yourself. Lean against the one who holds the whole universe together. Begin to know, and leaning's a process. Okay, I'm putting more and more weight. Begin to put more and more weight on God. Begin to day by day, moment by moment, lean a little bit more forward and begin to see that you can rest in him, that you can truly relax. I know when I'm going to be driving South Dakota, especially on the way back, I'll be able to sleep on the plane a little bit. I'm one of these people, I can sleep on a driveway, no problem. I can sleep anywhere. All right, but it's going to be on the way back that Saturday. We have to be at the airport at like 7:30 in the morning, and we're 4 hours away. All right, we're going to have to leave pretty early to get there on time. I'm going to be like on the wheel, kind of like shaking myself awake, and in a given moment, it's in those kind of moments, all right, when you really are so tired. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it, praying. I'll make it. When I get to the airport, I'm going to be standing in a line. All right? And I'm going to feel like, I think I could fall asleep standing right here. The problem with falling asleep standing up is you are going to fall. All right? When you start really falling asleep and you can actually like catch yourself kind of like falling, I think it's in moments like that you realize you have to rest against something if you really want to fall asleep. If you really want to be able to go to like fall asleep, you have to be resting against something. I can be sitting up. I can be laying down. I think I could like hang like a bat. I think that would work. I don't know. I haven't tried it. But I think I could sleep it. But I need to rest on something bigger than me. The floor, a wall, a chair. All right? I need to rest on something. You can fall asleep in the arms of God. You can rest in him. And that kind of rest, when we think about what rest is, it's this relaxed. We're not worried. When we finally fall asleep, we're usually worried up until we actually fall asleep. Once we fall asleep, there's peace in that sleep. There's peace in that rest. We can rest in God. Don't lean on your own understanding, but in all your ways, acknowledge him. In all our ways, begin to acknowledge God. I missed all the ways that I rely on you. We can miss wow, God keeps my heart beating and my lungs breathing. All right, we can look like, yes, I worked hard for this home. But every time something breaks, you begin to realize like, wow, I am a busted pipe away from losing my home. I am a lightning strike away from losing my home. I am a hurricane, a tornado, a very random earthquake in Florida away of losing my home. It can be taken away in a moment. I see that God protects that. Everything in our life, as you begin to look at everything that you feel like you've accumulated and everything you feel like you've earned, you can begin to see that, wow, it is but by the grace of God that I have these things. It is because of his goodness. And I begin to rest in him. I begin to acknowledge him, not just because I go to church Sunday mornings, but in every aspect of that I do. Every piece of food I eat, I can praise God for. Every glass of water I drink, I can praise God for. Everything, every moment I walk into work, right when it's the hardest moment of the day, I can praise God for that opportunity. It's difficult to begin to look at everything and every molecule of the universe as being God. In all our ways, let's begin to acknowledge him. And it says he will direct your paths. He will make your paths straight. When I learned it in the King James Version when I was a kid, he will direct your paths. And I guess maybe the picture you always have is like you come to this fork in the road, and maybe there's 2 and 3 and 4 forks in the road. And what you're doing is, Lord, please help me with which path I should take. All right, and you in that prayer, you guys go and you're like, decide, okay, is it this? Did I choose this path on my own, or was it God? And we go back and forth, and I'm like, well, I just got to go some direction, right? We start heading down a path. And that's not what it's saying. The literal words there is, he will direct your path. He will make your path straight. The idea is not saying he's going to help you pick the path. He's saying he's going to change the path that is in front of you to be straighter. All right, that's where we're running into that. We see these 4 paths and we're like, Lord, help me with the decision. What happened here? When we are truly acknowledging God and trusting in him, all right, he starts making it so that, whoa, hold on. there's like this merging, and there's one single path that I continue to follow down. And you're like, Joe, you're telling me there's never going to be a tough decision down the road? All right, when I begin to really follow God, and I say, when I think about the end result of what God wants in our life, is he wants us to be about his kingdom and his glory for his righteousness. And yes, there is always one path when it comes to honoring God and his kingdom. Now, when we look down, you stare at your feet, and you're beginning to look like, well, yes, does God call me to do this ministry or that ministry? Is he calling me to do this or that? Yeah, when you kind of stare at yourself and your own feet, yeah, there seems to be many paths. But I'm going to tell you, there's one singular path because there is one singular God. All right, and we are following after him full speed ahead, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. No, there aren't billions of decisions to make when it comes down to, yes, I want to build his kingdom, not mine. Yes, I want to honor him, not me. Yes, I care about his righteousness more than whatever definition of righteousness I want to make up for myself. When you are following after God, it is one path. He makes them straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. All right, I'm not, when I begin to think about wise in my own eyes, what I tend to think about in that moment is I'm not going to judge myself by what I think other people in this world want me to be like. That I don't have to judge myself the way I think other people want me to live and act. I am responsible before one person, and that is Jesus Christ. That is who I want to be wise in his eyes. And other people's eyes, my own eyes, doesn't mean anything to me. Fear the Lord and shun evil. When we really begin to just say how simple, how do we begin to make these right decisions? How do we begin to say, like, it feels like there's so many paths in my life right now. How do we really begin to trust God? We just begin to say, all right, I'm going to fear the one that is worthy of fear, the one that is all powerful, all capable, the one that can orchestrate and control an entire narrative without ever being mentioned once. That person is worthy. I'm not afraid of anything society might think. I'm not afraid of what any one person might do. I'm not afraid of what any circumstances might do to me. I'm not afraid of what natural disasters might come my way. I don't have to fear any of that stuff because I'm fearing the one who creates all that stuff. I'm fearing the one that is in control of everything. All right, and when I begin to know more, I loved our discussion in Sunday school this morning. We're going through Proverbs. We'll continue that for the next couple weeks. We talked a little bit the last couple weeks about fear. All right, and we kind of keep coming to this conclusion that, yeah, when you first get introduced to God, fear is a pretty legitimate belief. It's a pretty legitimate way of reacting to God. But as you get to know him more, you can begin to know that you, individually you, do not need to fear him. That he loves you and you can rest in him. But that only comes when you get to know him in his word. All right? And if at the end of the day, what should always be simple to us is what is truly evil. Can I push aside, like, this is wrong. I'm not going to do anything that's wrong. And I'm going to say in so many circumstances, if we just simply say, you know, I'm not going to do what's wrong, it ends up eliminating a lot of choices. And a lot of times, choices that we have to face in our future are because of decisions we made in our past that were wrong, that then created complicated paths in our future. If we continue to just say day by day, moment by moment, I am going to follow God, I'm going to trust in him, and I'm going to push away anything that is evil. Yes, I believe he makes a singular path in our life. So when I say that I want to trust God, as the praise team comes on up, when I say I want to trust God more, what I'm saying is I want to be able to rest in him, not worry about the consequence, not worry about other circumstances, not worry about things out of my control, but trust the one who is in control. When it comes to the many decisions I still feel like I face in my life all the time, decisions I have to make, I want to be so clear on what does it really mean to follow God and his kingdom. If I'm really following after him, not leaning on myself, I think many times I'm going to see like, whoa, Joe, that's your kingdom. That's your glory. This is God. This is his kingdom and his glory and his righteousness. And any moment, I always want to push aside, shun, push away, get away from anything that is evil. I think that's going to help me. I hope it's going to help you begin to really see what it is to trust God, to tangibly see what trusting God can look like in your everyday life. Let's close in prayer. God, I pray in this moment, I pray in this time where we get to worship you for a few more moments through song. I pray that this is the start to our week, where we might not be singing every moment of the day, but we can absolutely be worshiping you every moment of the day, honoring you, acknowledging you in every aspect. Continue to reveal yourself in sometimes the mundane things in this life, that when we can truly begin identifying your moving, that we can identify your heart, identify your principles and your truths, that we can more easily navigate what seems like a complicated world. God, I want to trust more. I want to have the faith of my kids to just leap towards you. I pray that for people here as well. Whatever big decision they're facing, whatever trials and challenges are going on in their life right now, and I'm sure there are many, God, start revealing to them the straight path, the directed path that you have made before them as they begin to truly search after you. God, let us not miss you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.